Ever wondered why we yawn all day, but dream of changing the world in a major way? It's the Bored and Ambitious Show.
In 1626, a Dutch merchant named Peter Minuit stepped onto the southern tip of Manhattan and purchased the entire island from the Lenape people for 60 guilders worth of trade goods. 4 centuries later, that island generates over $600 billion in annual GDP, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. More economic output than most countries on Earth. But here is the thing. Manhattan is not special. It is representative. Every major city on this continent exists because someone looked at a piece of geography and saw an economy. Beaver pelts in Montreal, tobacco in Virginia, codfish in Boston, gold in San Francisco, oil in Houston, movies in Los Angeles, religious freedom in Philadelphia. The founding economics of each city became its cultural DNA, and that DNA is still legible today. Boston was founded on God and codfish. It became the education capital of the world. Houston was founded on cotton and oil. It put humans on the moon. Chicago was a portage point between 2 watersheds. It became the city that feeds the world. This is the story of how economics, geography, and ambition built a continent, one city at a time. But this was not empty land. Before a single European ship appeared on the horizon, North America was home to civilizations that had been building for millennia. This is their story too. And it starts before the ships. In 1100 AD, near present-day St. Louis, a city of 20,000 people rose around massive earthen mounds. Cahokia. It was the largest city north of Mexico, larger than London at the same time. Copper arrived from Michigan, shells from the Atlantic coast, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains. This was not a primitive settlement. This was a continental economy. Farther east, 5 nations, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, formed the Haudenosaunee Confederacy under the Great Law of Peace, one of the oldest participatory democracies in the world. Representative councils, separation of powers, consensus building. Benjamin Franklin studied this system. In 1988, the United States Congress formally acknowledged the Confederacy's influence on the Constitution through House Concurrent Resolution 331. The political architecture of North America has indigenous roots, and in central Mexico, the Aztec capital Tenochtitlan held more than 200,000 people, causeways, aqueducts, floating gardens. The Spanish conquistador Bernal Diaz del Castillo saw it and wrote, quote, "I have seen things that I do not believe myself," end quote. These were not empty lands waiting to be discovered. They were civilizations with their own founding economics, agriculture, trade, tribute, thriving for centuries. Then contact came, European diseases, smallpox, measles, influenza, killed an estimated 90% of the indigenous population. Entire civilizations collapsed before Europeans even arrived in their territories because the diseases traveled faster than the explorers. The land Europeans claimed was empty because its inhabitants had just died. That is the context for everything that follows. Spain arrived first among the European powers. St. Augustine, Florida, founded in 1565, is the oldest continuously occupied European settlement in North America, built as a military garrison to protect treasure fleets. The Spanish mission system stretched from Florida to California. These were not just churches, they were factories disguised as churches. Agriculture, ranching, craft production, economic infrastructure wrapped in theology. Then the French. Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec in 1608, not as a colony, but as a trading post. The French model was fundamentally different. Rather than displacing indigenous peoples, the French integrated with them. Coureurs de bois lived with indigenous communities, learned languages, married into families, and built trade networks that mapped the continent's interior. The beaver pelt was the currency that drew French traders along waterways from the St. Lawrence to the Mississippi, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf. And, at the mouth of the Mississippi in 1718, France founded New Orleans, the most strategic commercial location on the continent. Whoever controlled that point controlled the drainage of 40% of North America. The Creole culture that emerged there, French, Spanish, African, Caribbean, indigenous, produced jazz, gumbo, and an identity unlike anything else on Earth. 3 centuries later, that identity has not faded. Meanwhile, on the English seaboard, different economic models were creating different Americas. Jamestown, Virginia, 1607. Not a religious colony, a business venture. The Virginia Company of London sent colonists to find gold. They found mosquitoes, starvation, and death. Then John Rolfe planted Caribbean tobacco, and everything changed. A single tobacco plant, dried and shipped to London, was worth more than a month's wages for an English laborer. That math changed everything. Tobacco created the plantation economy. The plantation economy demanded labor, and labor demand created the transatlantic slave trade. In 1619, the first enslaved Africans arrived in Virginia. The same year, the House of Burgesses convened for the first time. Democracy and slavery arrived on the same soil in the same year. Farther north, Puritans built Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630. John Winthrop called it a city upon a hill. But beneath the theology was merchant capitalism, codfish, shipbuilding, maritime insurance. Harvard was founded in 1636, just 6 years after the colony itself, because the Puritans believed an educated ministry was worth paying for. Today, more than 100 colleges and universities operate in the Boston metro area, according to the Boston Planning and Development Agency. Kendall Square, Route 128, Moderna. The Puritan investment in education is still compounding 4 centuries later. Philadelphia came next. William Penn's Holy Experiment in 1682, a colony founded on religious tolerance. Quakers, Mennonites, Jews, Catholics, anyone could come, and tolerance turned out to be excellent economics. It attracted the most diverse, skilled population in the colonies. Benjamin Franklin embodied the city's spirit. Practical, tolerant, endlessly inventive. Philadelphia became the largest city in British North America, the site of the Constitutional Convention, the first national capital. And then there was Charleston. Founded in 1670, it became the wealthiest city in colonial America, built on rice, indigo, and enslaved labor. More enslaved Africans entered North America through Charleston's port than any other. The architecture is stunning. The gardens are beautiful, and they were funded by one of the most brutal economies in human history. The beauty was real. The brutality was real. Both are the story. By the late 1700s, a pattern had locked into place. Geography attracted an economy. The economy attracted people. The people created a culture, and the culture persisted long after the original economy changed. Now that pattern was about to accelerate. New Amsterdam. The Dutch West India Company's trading post on the finest natural harbor on the Atlantic seaboard. The Dutch were traders, not settlers. They did not care about your religion or your nationality. They cared about commerce. As the historian Russell Shorto wrote, quote, "The Dutch were not interested in establishing a new Zion. They were interested in establishing a counting house." End quote. 18 languages were spoken on a single island. When the English seized it in 1664 and renamed it New York, nothing fundamental changed. The city stayed commercial, diverse, and ruthlessly ambitious. The Erie Canal opened in 1825 and rewrote the economic map overnight. It connected the Great Lakes to the Atlantic via the Hudson River, slashing freight costs from $100 per ton to $10. New York surpassed Philadelphia as the nation's commercial capital, and never looked back. Wall Street, literally named for the wall the Dutch built to keep the English out, became the financial center of first the nation, then the world. Then came Ellis Island. Opened in 1892, it processed approximately 12 million immigrants over the next 62 years, according to the National Park Service. 12 million people through a single building. There is an old Italian immigrant saying that captures what they found. I came to America because I heard the streets were paved with gold. When I got here, I found out three things. First, the streets were not paved with gold. Second, they were not paved at all. Third, I was expected to pave them. And they did pave them. Today, more than 800 languages are spoken in New York City. The Dutch traders from 1626 would recognize its DNA. Now westward. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803, Thomas Jefferson doubled the size of the nation for roughly 3 cents an acre. Lewis and Clark mapped the economic possibilities of a continent, guided at critical stages by indigenous knowledge, most famously Sacagawea. And at the junction of two watersheds, a city was waiting to be born: Chicago. In 1830, fewer than 200 people lived at a muddy portage between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River system. By 1890, it was the second largest city in America. The reason was infrastructure. First canals, then railroads, 6 major lines converging on a single point. Today, 25% of all United States freight rail traffic still passes through Chicago, according to the Association of American Railroads. Chicago became the place where everything met: grain from the plains, lumber from Wisconsin, cattle from Texas. The Union stockyards processed more meat than any place on earth. The Chicago Board of Trade invented commodity futures, financial instruments that let farmers sell crops before they were harvested. Carl Sandburg called it hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads, and the nation's freight handler. Chicago was the original platform economy. It did not produce goods. It connected producers and consumers. The city that feeds the world. Connecting that world required the Transcontinental Railroad, completed on May 10, 1869, at Promontory Summit, Utah. It collapsed the continent from months of travel to days. Irish immigrants built from the east. 20,000 Chinese laborers built from the west, blasting through the Sierra Nevada with nitroglycerin and hand drills, the most dangerous work on the most dangerous terrain. And then America thanked them by slamming the door. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was the first federal law to restrict immigration by nationality. We used their hands to build the road, and then we used the law to lock them out. It was not repealed until 1943. The Homestead Act of 1862 had offered 160 acres to settlers on land taken from indigenous nations. The Dawes Act that followed stripped tribes of 90 million acres. The economics of expansion were real. The costs were real. Both are the story. The railroad connected the continent, but the next century would explode it with gold, oil, film, and a technology that made the desert bloom: air conditioning. January 1848. James Marshall finds gold at Sutter's Mill in California. Within 2 years, San Francisco goes from a village of 200 to a city of 35,000. The gold rush was the original startup culture, people abandoning careers, crossing continents, risking everything on a bet. Most failed. The real money was in selling pickaxes. Levi Strauss sold jeans. Wells Fargo sold banking. That culture of risk tolerance never left. Today, The Bay Area deploys more than $70 billion annually in venture capital, according to PitchBook. The city that bet on gold now bets on code and on artificial intelligence. The gold rush pattern repeats. January 10th, 1901. The Spindletop gusher near Beaumont, Texas blew 100,000 barrels per day, more oil than anyone had ever seen. Houston became the energy capital of the world. Oil money funded petrochemical plants. Then NASA's Johnson Space Center. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Then the Texas Medical Center, the largest medical complex on Earth. 63 institutions, 106,000 employees, 10 million patient encounters a year according to Texas Medical Center data. Cottontown to Moon City in a single lifetime. And now Houston is pivoting again. Hydrogen, carbon capture, clean energy. The founding DNA is not oil. The founding DNA is energy. Then Los Angeles, a Spanish mission settlement with no natural harbor and not enough water. But it had sun, cheap land, and distance from Thomas Edison's film patents on the East Coast. Hollywood was born as a patent dodge. William Mulholland's 233-mile aqueduct seized the Owens Valley's water and made a desert metropolis possible. Then aerospace followed. Douglas, Lockheed, Hughes. L.A. was built on three impossible things: movies, water from somewhere else, and airplanes. Today, its port complex handles roughly 40% of all United States container imports, according to the Port of Los Angeles. And then came the technology that remade the map. Air conditioning, commercially viable after the 1920s, became the most transformative force in American demographic history. It made Houston, Phoenix, Miami, Atlanta, and Dallas livable year-round. Between 1950 and 2000, the American Population Center shifted roughly 1,000 miles south and west, according to the United States Census Bureau. A single technology reshaped the demographic map of the continent. The founding economics pattern has not stopped. It is operating right now. Austin, founded on government and university, now being refounded on tech, with 33% population growth between 2010 and 2020. Phoenix, receiving more than $40 billion in semiconductor manufacturing investment under the CHIPS Act. AI investment concentrating in San Francisco, Seattle, and Boston, each city's founding DNA attracting the corresponding industry. And 45% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children, according to the National Foundation for American Policy. The economics of fresh starts is still the most powerful force on the continent. So here is the pattern. It has been running for 1,000 years, and it is not finished. Every city on this continent started as a bet. Someone looked at a piece of geography and saw an economy. They built it. Others came. The economy created a culture. The culture persisted long after the original economy changed. Montreal is still Franco-North American because of the fur trade. Boston is still the education capital because Puritans wanted educated ministers. New York is still the most diverse city on earth because Dutch traders did not care where you came from as long as you could do business. Houston is still the energy capital because of a gusher in 1901. San Francisco still bets on the future because the gold rush selected for risk-takers. This story includes indigenous civilizations that were here first and were devastated by contact. It includes enslaved people who built the wealth of a nation and were denied its promise. It includes Chinese laborers who built the railroad and were then excluded by law. It includes every community that was redlined, displaced, or forgotten. The glass-half-full approach does not ignore any of this. It says, tell the full story. What was built, what it cost, and what it is still becoming. The founding DNA of North America, the idea that you can cross an ocean, build something from nothing, and become someone new, is still the most powerful economic force on this continent. It is not history. It is operating system. Study the founding economics of where you live. It will explain more about your city's politics, culture, and future than any other single factor. Then ask, is my city adapting its DNA, or is it stuck in its founding moment? The cities that thrive will be the ones that honor their roots while evolving for new realities. 12 million immigrants came through Ellis Island. Today, 45% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children. The economics of fresh starts built North America. They are still building it. The continent is not finished. It was never finished. It was always under construction. One city, one bet, one builder at a time.